Tsal'alh, Mutesh, Riley, and Sky College Kuza. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to do this presentation today because it'll be my first time doing this type of presentation as a doctor. So in February, after about 5 years of research, I completed my PhD in February, and that work wouldn't have been able to happen without my family, my community, and the support that I've gotten essentially since before I was born. It goes back. So the work that I'm presenting today will be a little bit of looking at Indigenous research within Indigenous communities, particularly Tsal'alh communities and Tsal'alh. And then I'm going to give a little bit of a recap of the outcome of my research and what happened. And I knew I would lose my button pusher, Shannon. Shannon's like, I'll press buttons, I'm like, you're busy. So a little bit about me. I'm a former classroom teacher. I've taught in numerous different settings, but the majority of my teaching was at the Chipatong, the Secwepemc Immersion School on Adams Lake Reserve, and teaching mostly grades 4, 5, 6, and 7. Did a little bit of 8 and 9. TOC, right from Head Start right up to grade 12. So I got a breadth of teaching classroom experience. And through that, I was able to begin my career at Tsal'alh Members University in the Faculty of Education and Social Work. So I'm an associate teaching professor with tenure. So that basically allows me to have academic freedom and do the work that I need to do without a lot of pushback. On the side, me and my husband own portable septics and restroom trailers, deluxe new, and so that we started just before COVID, and that keeps him busy and keeps me keeping him busy, if that makes sense. And starting this July, I'm switching from a teaching role, they call bipartite, to a research role. So that means instead of teaching 8 courses a year, I'm required to teach only 5. But I get course releases for supporting faculty around indigenizing things that they're doing at the university. So I might even essentially only be teaching 1 course a year because I'll be doing a lot of other work with the faculty and across the whole university. Looking forward to it. I know I'm going to eventually miss teaching, but I'll find different ways by teaching faculty through that way. Before I made that big decision, I talked to my mom, I talked to Auntie Rose, I talked to the elders in the Secwepemc territory, particularly the Tsal'alhs, because I felt like if I'm making such a huge change in the work that I'm doing around incorporating Secwepemc knowledges into TRU's work, is that something that they will continue to support? Or are they kind of okay with having somebody else take that work and I do more research? So I did a lot of consultation before deciding where my service should be, because that's really what I see myself in the role and the privilege that I have with my degrees, that I can be of service for community members. Next slide. I'm just reading it from mine. Yeah. So before I can talk about my own research, I really wanted to reflect about research because I think there's kind of 2 sides of how people view research. There's been a lot of negative experiences with Indigenous communities having, especially early anthropologists, coming in and doing research on us and telling our story for us. And when I think about trying to relate that, I think we all can experience when we had a lot of conversations around Indian control of Indian education. So I don't know if you remember, kind of in the 70s when the Indian Brotherhood was really pushing that, Indigenous people should have control over Indigenous education. We don't need other people telling us what we should be doing. And I really feel that's the same for research. So we need to start having those conversations around research. We've always been researchers. I remember, sitting at Grandpa's house and he would tell me about the different years of the snow on the mountains and how it's changed over the years. And so they read the land and they take note, and it's through this observation and this internal recording of what's happening with the land. So we've always been researchers, and we've always been researched. But the outside researchers have not always come in a good way. The work that they've done, when you think of early anthropologists like James Tate and others that we hear, I'm in some regards thankful for what they did record, because otherwise we wouldn't have access to some of those things that have been lost. So there's good and bad things. But today I kind of want to talk about the importance of research that's rooted in protocol, consent, and community leadership. We can't have Indigenous research without those things. Next page. So why I am really starting to have these conversations is because research really can cause harm, just like Indigenous control over Indigenous education. We want to make sure that what we are researching is for those that need to hear it. So we don't want people misrepresenting our knowledge systems with outside theories. We have, for instance, early anthropologists hearing our stories and then interpreting it through their non-Indigenous lens and making assumptions about our stories and our way of life. Whereas if we had an Indigenous person that understood those stories, they could then present it and honor it in a different way. These are just some things, so framing our sacred practices as metaphors or symbols. We often hear our stories being referred to as myths and legends, which initially gives you the idea that it's not true, that it's a fairy tale, and that's not the case. And a lot of times even for me, to read a lot of these things that are published, how do you understand the jargon that they're presenting, right? So how do we then retranslate the academic English jargon into someone that can understand it on different terms? So wanting to make sure that that is presented in a good way. Okay, next page. Just some things that I'm coming across as kind of some red flags is misrepresents our knowledge systems with outsider theories. So trying to, for instance, look at our Tsal'alh 7 models of life through a different theory, a different philosophy. You can't do that because they're two completely different things. Quoting elders or community members without consent in a way that they fully understand where this knowledge is going to be put forward and how it's going to be used and who they are going to represent. Next page. So, some of the work that I've looked at through when I'm looking at Indigenous research is how can we make sure. Oh, next page. Okay. That's good. Oh, is it? That's not what I said. So, not having co-authorship or nation review. Using pan-Indigenous language without cultural specificity. One of these examples that I have is the medicine wheel. There's this pan-Indigenous view of the medicine wheel, the physical, mentally, emotional, the quadrants, and what we were doing. Crystal gave a presentation of it, but having it represented in a way that seems like it's specific to that nation. It doesn't mean that we don't want or need or can't use those, but it's giving credit where credit's due. So one of the examples I have here, Crystal, actually, do you want to hold this up? Is a graphic that my daughter Micah created. She attended a bunch of workshops with myself, with Bucky John and Laura Grizzly Paws, where they talked about the Tsal'alh medicine wheel and the different colors, the different animals, the different seasons, the different stories that all encompass our medicine wheel, including the financial piece, the social relations, having Mother Earth in the middle, and the blue, the creator around the outside. And so our Tsal'alh medicine wheel is very different than the traditional medicine wheel that we're used to. And my daughter, having heard and been part of all these workshops, I said, I need something to represent that. So here you have a young Tsal'alh girl learning from her mentors and her elders, and then creating a diagram. That right there is what we would call ethical research. The next piece of that would then be for her or myself to go back to those mentors and be like, is this right? Did I present it right? Did I say the right words? Am I on the right track? And being okay to be corrected with your mistakes. Thank you. Your hands are getting started. I do have that saved as a PDF. So if you're interested in using it, what I might end up doing is just having Micah's name attached to it and maybe a little bio of her and where she's learned it, so that we can begin passing that on. Next, yeah. So within research, I've come across a lot of non-Indigenous researchers coming to me or hearing about stories about them saying, hey, I want to research you and I want to research, I think you should research about homelessness or addictions or this within your community. And that's not ethical research. Ethical research is going to somebody and saying, I want to be of service, what can I do, what do you need, here's some ideas, and how can I do this for you? So you aren't having someone coming in and telling you what they think is best for you in your community. So it really begins with the community, not the university, involving informed consent in a language that people fully understand, following cultural protocols, and prioritizing that reciprocity relationship piece and giving back. TRU currently has this important research ethics policy, and I'm beginning the conversation with the Tsal'alh chiefs on we need to have one for the Tsal'alh. We need a Tsal'alh research ethics policy so that if somebody comes into any of our nations, we know what's being researched and how it's being researched and what's involved, because I think it's really important that certain protocols are followed so that we're not causing community harm. Sherry went to the next slide. So my own research approach was led by questions within our community. I presented some ideas during COVID to Chief and Council. I got great feedback, guided by elders like my mom, my aunties, my uncles, and looking at building it around our Tsal'alh laws, teaching and values, which I have another diagram I'm going to show. So I didn't begin with a theory, I began by listening. I asked what people wanted to see studied, and I made sure that the knowledge was presented in a good way, and constantly checking in with Auntie Frida, Auntie Rose, and my mom. So in order to do good ethical research, we need our own research ethics grounded in Tsal'alh values. Our knowledge is not data, it's a living responsibility. And we as a nation decide how it's shared, protected, and passed on. All of our research in our communities should serve our nation. So that means we need to create and enforce our own research ethics, not borrowing from the university and specifically following theirs, because theirs is quite flawed and doesn't fully understand the nuances of Indigenous research. And I'm going to give a few examples, but all my research, my degree is from the University of Waikato in New Zealand, and I chose this university for many different reasons, but one of them is I got the opportunity to have Dr. Linda Smith. She's a renowned trailblazer in Indigenous research. Anybody that does research knows who Linda is, and to be mentored under her and have her support and guidance was amazing. So my research focus really began with listening to my mom and her story. We all are familiar with my mom and her athleticism. You think about the work that my mom's done with basketball, baseball, soccer, broom ball, track. The list goes on of the types of sports that she partook in. And was always, when I talked to people, was about her sportsmanship and her ability to include others and uplift them as athletes. Hearing her story at the residential school and her journey through sport, and how when she was raising me, her training regimen, her training that she did in downtown Kamloops, running the bridges, going to the YMCA, swimming, doing weights, doing the sauna, picking me up from school, going to the baseball game or the soccer game, just constantly being physical, and that was really a part of her healing. And listening through the stories, the idea was to research and speak to other women that have kind of used sports as a physical way of dealing with trauma. But with COVID-19 and the rediscovery of the 215, the last week way, I took the ideas, but then essentially just allowed time and space to hear the stories. Whatever they wanted to talk about, whatever they were willing to share that day, and use those stories. I didn't come with questions. I didn't want to re-trigger. I didn't want to make it, because I'm not a counselor, not a healer. So I just wanted time and space for them to tell their stories in whatever way that might happen. So essentially what came from it was hearing a lot of their stories, but then allowing my children to be a part of this research. The intergenerational research was really the main thing that came from my research. And what happened was my oldest son, Riley, he did all the transcribing for my aunties. So he listened to all of the stories, he transcribed them. And for me, it uplifted and felt good because I'm not putting those stories into a computer program or hiring a non-Indigenous person to listen to these stories and write them out. Right from being recorded to being put on paper, I really felt that these stories needed to be honored and respected. And it allowed an opportunity for Riley to hear these stories firsthand from the voices of his matriarchs in the family. And so that really empowered him to 10 minutes? Okay. You guys can handle me for another 10 minutes. So it really allowed him to not only gain skills that he could put on his resume about transcribing, but it provided him a way to hear those stories. And as mentioned, my daughter, she's artistic, and you'll notice at the front there was these posters. So this is the work from my daughter. She just turned 13 in January, so she did these a couple years ago. So the research questions we talked about, me and my daughter, and then we interviewed my mom and my aunties, and we put those into Canva, and my daughter did all of the graphics and made them into posters. So that again, the stories, what's being asked, all the things are being cared for by a young Tsal'alh woman. I have lots more copies, so if you want more to bring home, please come get them. And then I have a set, I know Sandra's still here, for the school to put up in the school here. So there's a bigger poster set for them. And then thinking of my youngest son, Zion. So if you were here at the gathering a couple weeks ago, we had our endurance run, where they ran from the tree to the picnic table up at the High Line. So my son, just days before turning 11, he did that run. Him and Vision were the only ones to enter it, and he not only entered it, but he completed it in 2 hours and 15 strongly believe from the physicalness that my mom encompassed with her training. He's an amazing baseball player, so you will 100% be cheering for him on the MLB channel in 10 years or so, guaranteed. Because he's already been asked, he's played baseball in Las Vegas, he's played baseball in Arizona by teams asking him to come and play and be a part. And so just extremely proud of his dedication to physical literacy. And a lot of that has come from the teachings from my mom. I already have the poster. Should you put one more? Yeah. So these are the posters that I was talking about that I have extra copies up here. There's a lot here, so please, I don't want to take them back home. Shannon bought them, so take as many as you want, hand them out if you have others. I really want to see this get bigger. So there's many of us, we have many aunties, young and old, that I feel we can really uplift and create this role model. We see role model posters put up in schools all over the place. On the flip side of that, I think we should be uplifting our youth and do youth role model posters that are Tsal'alh, that are Tsal'alh, and have those out in our schools. It doesn't take much. They're a little bit pricey, but the work behind it would be really good. So you can go to the next slide. Another graphic that my daughter worked on was the Tsal'alh 7 Laws of Life. Again, these were teachings that we started hearing when my daughter, she was 6. We were taking language classes with the late Bucky John, and he would always incorporate the Tsal'alh 7 Laws of Life in his language lessons. And so that's kind of when it started. And looking through the different laws and highlighting how my mom and my aunties encompassed a lot of these teachings without being explicitly taught. It was just being natural to them as matriarchs. So this is also a graphic that can be used or borrowed or what have you. All of the knowledge and all of the things I have, they're not mine, they're for the nation to use. That was one teaching that I really got from Gary Gottfredson, working with him at Chief Tom when we would work on Sapat curriculum. He was always, it's not ours to own, it's not ours to make profit off of. It's everybody's knowledge, and so we're just kind of that gateway of having the opportunity to be able to put it together in a way that we can share. My last slide is kind of my key takeaways. So the reflections that I had and deep conversations that I had talking with Dr. Linda Smith was, our research is about healing. It's about healing ourselves, our community, our families. And healing is relational, it's cultural, and it's intergenerational. Our matriarchal strength really shapes the future. I've seen that through the work, having conversations with my mom, Auntie Frida, Auntie Rose, and seeing how those conversations and opportunities are then displayed through my daughter Micah, who's 13, going through a lot of racism and bullying at school, but her strength and perseverance of knowing who she is as an Indigenous and Black young girl really is just profound because she has these strong teachings of who she is. Our research, Indigenous research, Tsal'alh research, Tsal'alh research, must come from the land, the family, and the language. We have enough researchers in our community. We have Dr. Roger John, we have Morris Foster here who's doing his master's. We have others in our community that can lead this research. We don't need non-Indigenous researchers coming in and telling us how to do this work. We already know how to do this work. We've been researchers for generations, and the opportunity for us to keep our stories and tell our own stories is very powerful. We don't need to always have everything out there for everybody to have access to. The BC curriculum has a learning principle that it says that learning some knowledge is sacred and it's not meant for others. And so unless you're an Indigenous person, you don't know what those sacred things are. We have elders that are so generous with their knowledge that they'll be happy to tell anybody, not knowing that that person could then use that in a way that they will profit off of. Because when you publish things, you're essentially profiting through your publications, whether that's monetary or even what we call for clout, right? For making our resume and everything really, really bigger. And I just, the language piece here, I remember a couple years ago when I was in the middle of my PhD and I had more opportunities to learn my language. I was like, you know what, if I can do a PhD, I can definitely learn my language. And honestly, learning my language is probably a lot harder than doing a PhD. But this whole journey definitely would not be possible without support. Support from my husband, from my children, my parents, my family, the Terry family, the Bull family, and even the Chief of Council, the Education Department. Cliff's still here, Darwin. They were one of my very early education coordinators that were always, they didn't make things hard for me to apply to go to post-secondary. It was always full encouragement. Here, yeah, go to school, take this, take that. And so I really feel like my role now is to provide that same opportunity for other Tsal'alh, other Tsal'alh, provide space and opportunities and help build capacity so that we can have more Tsal'alh, more Tsal'alh in these settings and giving our voice. Because it's really important to have our voice at certain tables, and there's power in numbers when there's more than one of us. So, is there any questions? Any questions or comments? I noticed that we didn't have that opportunity. Somebody spoke, and I think it was Gary that was like, what? No questions? I'm here, I'm going to be around through lunch and whatnot, so if you want to come have a conversation or give me your email, I can send you whatever graphics that you're wanting to have access to. Use them. I know there's a lot of communities here that probably could use them in some capacity in sharing, so they're there for everybody to use. Easy.
Posters, I have lots of posters.
She's got lots of posters here of her matriarchs, Patricia, Rose, and Rita. Amazing write-ups on them. This lady, she's a mother. She has an interest in all her children's activities. She knows Shwat Mukhchi. We converse in it all the time.